My favorite card game has always been poker. Texas Hold'em to be exact. I love everything about it. The ritual of the shuffle, the excitement of the gamble, the patience when the odds are against you, and especially that thrill of winning a big jackpot. But here's the thing a lot of people get wrong. It's not really a game of luck. It's a game of skill. You got to know how to read the room, to read people. You got to know when someone's bluffing. You got to know how to calculate the odds. You got to know when to bet big. You got to know when to hold up, know when to fold up, know when to walk away. Whoa, no. Okay, sorry. This isn't about Kenny Rogers. I have somebody else in mind, but we'll get to him a little bit later. To me, no one plays the poker game of music and Hollywood and fame better than Dolly Parton. Her career spans over 6 decades, and it's just filled with stories of tough hands, bold calls, big gambles, and yet she always walks away a winner. But this isn't a biography. There's plenty of those out there already. This is my personal tribute to Dolly. In this video, I'm going to be showing off some of my recent caricature work and my illustration art while counting down 10 of the most incredible and outrageous stories of how Dolly Parton managed her life and her career like she was playing a high-stakes poker game and she was in charge. Oh, and stick around to the end, because I got one extra story about how Dolly pulled off the biggest bluff of all time. Oh, hey, one more thing before we begin. Help me out. Take a second, like and subscribe below. This is but a wee channel, and it needs your support to grow up and be a big channel when it grows one day. All right, now, that's all I got for you. Let's shut up, shuffle up, and deal. Here's number 10. Okay, the number 10 spot on our list starts with a story that shows Dolly's humility more than her ambition, but it really firmly establishes her as the Queen of Diamonds. You see, in 2021, the lawmakers from the state of Tennessee proposed a statue to be erected in Dolly's honor and set up at the state capitol. Now, actually, this has already been done. About 2 decades ago, there was a statue erected to her in Tennessee, but in the home county that she grew up in. And Dolly actually already has 2 Hollywood stars on the Walk of Fame. But this statue would have been a bigger honor. It's a permanent one set up again in her home state, but more importantly in the state capitol. That means it stands alongside, statues of presidents and governors, cementing her as part of Tennessee history. And for most stars, that sort of recognition probably would have been really impossible to ignore or even just to turn down, but Dolly had a very different response. She explained that while she was flattered, she didn't feel it was the right time, and she didn't want to be placed on a pedestal while so many others were struggling. And that answer really is everything you need to know about Dolly in a nutshell. She's gracious, she's thoughtful, and she does very completely unexpected things. In poker terms, that's a queen who doesn't need a crown to prove her worth. She already shines brighter than a diamond. For the number 9 spot on this list, I'm going to go all the way back to the beginning of Dolly's career, the real start when she was eager to prove her talent, to attract an audience, and earn her seat at the table.
I think this is one of the prettiest that she's ever written, called I Will Always Love You. Miss Dolly Parton.
Thank you.
Back in the mid-60s, Dolly was barely 20 years old. This was before her fame, before anybody really knew who she was, and Nashville was kind of having a difficult time figuring out what to do with her. Dolly knew that she had talent, she had brains, she had good instinct. She had an enormous amount of self-confidence, but she needed her big break. And then came Porter Wagoner. Porter Wagoner was a country music star with a syndicated TV show, a loyal fan base, and a sharp eye for potential. And he had invited her to replace his longtime duet partner on his show, The Porter Wagoner Show. The audience didn't care for her initially, but Dolly wasn't going to be discouraged. She smiled through the rejection, she sang her heart out, and over time, slowly won them over. And this happened over a period of 7 years, where Dolly slowly became the main attraction on the show. Behind the curtain, though, there were some cracks. She was busy. She was writing hit songs that were climbing the charts. And she started thinking about a career that might evolve beyond the TV show. Now, Porter saw her talent, but he also saw her as an investment, a product, somebody who owed him, and he wasn't ready to let her go. So he resisted, he pushed back. He even threatened to derail her career at one point. And so Dolly responded. She did something, frankly, unique and amazing, something only Dolly would do. She wrote him a goodbye song. Yeah, that's the one you're thinking about, the most iconic farewell ballad in country music. It wasn't about a romance, it was about a business breakup, a message of gratitude and goodbyes that was wrapped up in poetry and grace. She played the song for Porter in private. The story goes that he cried and let her walk. And her solo career exploded. Jolene, Coat of Many Colors, and I Will Always Love You. All hits, all hers. Now, a few years after Dolly left the show, Porter threatened to sue her for breach of contract to the tune of about $3 million. And she didn't clap back. She actually paid him, and she did it quietly, strategically. And afterwards, she even expressed gratitude for the role that he played in launching her career. Now, personally, I think this was smart, and it was a really classy solution. You know, every success story starts with a place to learn and learn a few hard lessons that have to go along with it. And for Dolly, the Porter Wagoner show was that place. It gave her a spotlight, and it also gave her the scars. She learned the ropes, she sharpened her instincts, and she figured out how to survive in a very tough industry. Now, sometimes the hardest decision in a game is knowing when to leave the table. And Dolly's decision to walk away, and the way that she did that through a presence of grace and strength, proved that she was ready to stop being somebody else's partner and start being the dealer of her own game. At number 8, I'm going to jump ahead to Dolly's first big opportunity to appeal to a larger audience in the mainstream outside of just country music. This was her opportunity to practice presenting her poker face. In 1977, Dolly sat down for an interview with Barbara Walters. And Barbara Walters was one of the most respected TV journalists at that time. She built a career and a reputation on interviews with world leaders, with presidents, and other cultural icons. Her interviews were sharp, they were serious, and sometimes even intimidating. But in her interview with Dolly, she skipped over the music, the talent, and the business smarts, went straight into the wigs, the curvy figure, and the image. Barbara probed. Dolly smiled.
Dolly, where I come from, would I have called you a hillbilly?
If you had of, it would have been something very natural, but I would have probably kicked your shins or something.
I mean, imagine being introduced to a national audience that way. That's the opening hand that Barbara deals to Dolly, and Dolly just smiles, doesn't let it rattle her, and refuses to back down and just moves the conversation forward.
My people were not that educated, but they are very, very intelligent. Good common sense, horse sense, we called it.
Dolly, did you look like this when you were a kid?
Not quite.
I mean, you didn't have the blonde wig, but when you went into school, when you were 11, 12, 13, was it this about you?
Well, you mean the full figure?
Yeah, that's what I meant.
Yeah, I thought that's what you meant.
My assistant asked me something, and I'm going to blame it on her because I wouldn't have had the nerve otherwise. Is it all you? Would you mind standing up? We saw you on stage in all the filming.
Well, this is not really...
I'm
not all that curvy in this outfit.
No, it's not bad.
But
That's her idea of not all that curvy. Do you give your measurements?
No.
Amazing. You know, instead of asking anything about her music or her impact on her fans, Barbara literally asks questions about her body. And Dolly, again, same calm demeanor, same steady smile, the poker face intact.
You don't have to look like this. You're very beautiful. You don't have to wear the blonde wigs. You don't have to wear the extreme clothes, right?
Yeah, now look, on the surface, this may even sound a little bit like a compliment, but listen closely. It's really a critique, an implication that Dolly's chosen image cheapens her somehow. And still, Dolly never takes the bait. She leans right back in, and with confidence.
To be appreciated. I'm very real where it counts, and that's inside, and as far as my outlook on life and the way I care about people and the way I care about myself and the things that I care about.
She's just absolutely secure in herself. And that's the kind of answer that wins you the game without ever even having to show your cards.
But do you ever feel that you're a joke, that people make fun of you?
Yeah, this is where Barbara really swings for the fences. Asking if Dolly Parton, the woman who wrote Jolene and I Will Always Love You, feels like she's a joke. I mean, it's blunt, it's rude, and it could have easily rattled somebody who was less secure about themselves, but that ain't Dolly.
I'm very content. I like the kind of person that I am, so I can afford to piddle around and diddle around with makeups and clothes and stuff because I am secure with myself.
This is a great example of a woman who already knew exactly who she was. Confident, self-assured, and still humble. That's why this moment is so powerful. Barbara tried to strip down the image of who Dolly was, but Dolly's responses proved that she was the real deal. And she even said it.
Just say, I am sure of myself as a person. I'm sure of my talent.
This interview is absolutely unforgettable because even when the questions were rude or probing, well, Dolly just kept her poker face and showed that she was the real deal. In just about any poker game, an ace in your hand is pretty powerful, but it's only really as powerful as the card sitting next to it. An ace with a 7 isn't really considered to be a strong hand. But when you have a pair of aces, well, that's a hand you never fold. At the number 7 spot on our list, I've got Dolly's most famous duet, the story about islands in the stream with Kenny Rogers. I told you we'd be getting back to him. Promises kept. The song was written by the Bee Gees, and there are some conflicting stories out there about whether it was meant for Marvin Gaye or even Diana Ross to record it initially, but when Dolly and Kenny got in a studio and started singing together, it was basically just pure magic. Dolly and Kenny's voices blended like they'd been singing together for decades. It was a sound that was kind of sweet and rough and warm and true, all kind of at the same time. The audience didn't just hear the chemistry, they felt it. And to a certain degree, so did the tabloids. Rumors of a romance followed them around for years, but the truth was actually even better. Dolly and Kenny were never lovers. They were something actually a little bit more unique. Two stars with equal wattage, mutual respect, and no need to compete with each other. When they were asked about those rumors, well, they basically just laughed it off. In a 2013 interview with People magazine, they confirmed, again, that there was never a romance. And according to Dolly, we didn't have the time. As for Kenny Rogers, he was quoted as saying, "We may have been tempted, but we didn't want to ruin a good friendship. I think it would have." And Parton, for her part, agreed. It usually does. Now, over the next few decades, they performed together in Christmas specials, at charity events, and concerts all around the world, including Kenny's big farewell concert back in 2017. Dolly showed up hand in hand with her old friend, and they were still a perfect match. As a footnote, Kenny Rogers passed away in 2020, and Dolly's response to that was a very tearful message saying that she loved Kenny with all of her heart. I'd argue that this was probably one of the few times that the world really saw Dolly visibly shaken, and I think it probably reminded everyone just how deep that bond truly was. And Kenny Rogers was just one of the many faces, one of the many aces that Dolly paired with. She teamed up over the years with Emmylou Harris and Linda Ronstadt in the trio, creating some of the most celebrated harmonies in country music. She duetted with Willie Nelson, Julio Iglesias, Vince Gill, Norah Jones, even Paul McCartney. At number 6, we're going to talk about Dolly's introduction to Hollywood. If the media and Barbara Walters had taught her anything at this point, it was that Hollywood was a whole new game, and it was very, very different than the world of country music. But Dolly had made friends and found herself playing with another strong hand, a 3 of a kind. In 1980, Dolly made her big screen debut in a movie that was bold, funny, feminist, and decades ahead of its time. 9 to 5 wasn't just a workplace comedy, it was a cultural statement, a big old middle finger to corporate sexism. It came with a powerhouse cast, and Dolly made fast friends with her two A-list co-stars. Jane Fonda was a two-time Academy Award winner, and Lily Tomlin had also earned a nomination for her first film, but had truly made her name as a comedian on Rowan and Martin's Laugh-In. And then there was Dolly, a total question mark. Many critics saw her casting as a bit of a gimmick, assuming that she would never be able to keep up with these very talented actors. But Dolly surprised everyone. Her natural comic timing and her charisma made her a real standout. And the chemistry between the three women was absolutely undeniable. On screen, they played secretaries uniting against a sexist boss. And off-screen, they became genuine friends, a bond that's lasted for over 40 years. But those friendships did come with a few challenges. In the 80s, Jane Fonda was one of the most controversial celebrities in America, mostly because of her outspoken opposition to the Vietnam War. She was branded Hanoi Jane by critics, and reporters were quick to ask Dolly if she really wanted to be seen supporting her and risk offending her existing fans. And Dolly, for her part, didn't even hesitate. She said she loved Jane for who she was and wasn't about to change any of that based on some politics. Her loyalty mattered more than public approval. In the end, Dolly's loyalty and integrity was rewarded. 9 to 5 became one of the highest grossing films of 1980, absolutely cementing Dolly as a true movie star. And then there's the song. Dolly famously wrote 9 to 5 on the set, tapping the rhythm with her acrylic nails to mimic the sound of a typewriter. That little idea turned into something of an anthem for your average office worker at the time. It topped the country charts, topped the pop charts, it earned Dolly Grammys, and ultimately became one of her signature songs. For number 5, I've got a story about a very large unexpected purchase that Dolly made back in the 1980s. Celebrities spending money on expensive and lavish things isn't exactly shocking, but I don't think many people would have predicted that Dolly was such a wild card. By 1986, Dolly was becoming an icon, with the fame and the fortune that goes along with it. But instead of embracing a big, costly lifestyle, she instead made a very bold bet. She decided to buy into a struggling theme park in Tennessee, and then she renamed it Dollywood. For most celebrities, a move like that would have been just another crazy bid for attention, but for Dolly, it was one of a number of examples where she chose to bet on herself when nobody else would. And if you think about it, the formula for a successful theme park was pretty well established by then. You put it near a coast, you build it close to a major airport, anchor it in a city with a booming tourist trade. Disney had Orlando, Universal had Hollywood, Busch Gardens had Tampa. But Dolly, well, she has her theme park in the middle of Tennessee, surrounded by mountains, not beaches. It sounds outrageous, but it works. Dolly wasn't just slapping her name on a log flume. To her, this was more than just a business venture. It was a love letter to her hometown and her life growing up in the Smoky Mountains. When Dollywood opened, it wasn't just about roller coasters, it was about creating jobs for her hometown community and giving fans a place to experience her culture. The people that thought it would flop were proven wrong almost immediately. Dollywood grew into one of the most visited theme parks in America, drawing millions of people every year. It also doubled in size from 1986 to 2010. What started out as a risky bet turned out to be one of the more successful hands that Dolly has ever played, and it really just offers proof that a wild card can change everything and reshape that game in ways that nobody even expects. A good poker game isn't all action all the time. Sometimes things will calm down a bit, get a little bit quiet, but good players don't let that fool them or draw them into a false feeling of security. The game is still on. Bets are still being placed. At least one person is probably bluffing. And the mood can change quickly after dealing a new hand. For number 4, We're going to move away from Dolly's business ventures for just a moment to something a little less action-packed, her philanthropy. In the mid-90s, back when the music industry was very focused on sales and awards, but also fading radio play, Dolly took a different direction. She launched a small book program in her hometown. Just, a little something that she said to help kids fall in love with reading, and something that was ultimately inspired by her father, who had never actually learned to read or write. No tour, no big press conference, just a mailing list, some children's books, and a promise. Every child under 5 will get a free book in the mail. Every single month, no strings attached. That's it. No glitter, no rhinestones, just literacy. I'm talking about the Imagination Library, a program that mails free books to children every month from birth to age 5. And what started in her hometown in Tennessee quickly grew beyond anyone's expectations. To date, the Imagination Library has sent over 200 million books to children all over the world. But here's the genius of it all. This wasn't some vain celebrity project. Dolly took the time and the effort to build up an infrastructure and create a model for how to do similar programs like this, but on a larger scale. In short, she used her fame like an ace up the sleeve, using it to open doors and to establish relationships with contractors, governments, nonprofits, and even schools. Then she made that whole system sustainable and able to continue long after the press and all the media attention had moved on. While we're on the subject, Dolly also quietly gave millions of dollars to disaster relief efforts in Tennessee. When the wildfires spread through the Smoky Mountains back in 2016, she responded immediately, raising and donating millions to help displaced families. In 2020, during the early days of the COVID pandemic, she also donated $1 million to help fund vaccine research. Dolly downplayed it, of course, but the world noticed. She wasn't cashing out. She was using that money to pay it forward. And all that charity work started with the Imagination Library back in 1995, which, from a career perspective, isn't really a very good strategy. I mean, at this point, she's in her 40s, her radio airplay was slipping a bit. This is a time when most people would chase some sense of relevancy. But Dolly doubled down on purpose. For number 3, we have just another of a series of examples of a time that Dolly was underestimated. Back in the early 2000s, the music industry wasn't exactly betting on her anymore. Country music and country radio was looking for younger stars. And most artists at that stage probably would have slowed down, maybe even just played the hits and coasted for the rest of their career. But Dolly historically did things her own way. And she did something that most people would not have done in that situation. She decided to go all in and bet on herself. She launched her own record label, Dolly Records, and in 2008 released an album, Backwoods Barbie. It was the first mainstream country album that she put out in years, and it was entirely on her own terms. She financed it, she produced it, she promoted it on her own. No corporate safety net, no Nashville gatekeepers, and no one telling her what she could or could not do. And don't get ahead of me, it worked. The album debuted in the Billboard Top 20, her highest charting record in decades, and it reminded everyone that Dolly Parton was a creative force that could compete with people half her age. Sometimes the smartest move is a bold one, the one where you push all your chips into the center and you just let everything ride on what's in your hand. With Backwoods Barbie, Dolly showed that she was willing to risk it all just to stay true to herself, and she walked away with the pot yet again. For number 2, we're going to talk about one of Dolly's most recent and more surprising stories. This is about her induction into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame and how it inspired a series of new musical collaborations, but I'm just going to call it a full house. When the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame came calling in 2022, Dolly shocked everyone initially by saying she didn't think that she deserved it. In her words, she wasn't a rock artist, and Dolly, in true Dolly fashion, decided that she needed to earn it. She announced that she would be recording a rock album to justify the honor. And she delivered. In 2023, Dolly released Rockstar. A sprawling double album featuring collaborations with legends like Paul McCartney, Stevie Nicks, Elton John, Steve Tyler. It wasn't just a token gesture. Dolly went all in, proving that she could reinvent herself yet again. Before we get to Dolly's #1 story, the most amazing move of all, let me tell you about that bonus story that I promised. This is probably my favorite example of Dolly's poker game. I like to call it the big bluff. In poker, a bluff is a lie, a bit of a strategy meant to convince everyone at the table that you're showing more information about your hand than you really are. In 1978, Dolly Parton pulled off probably one of the greatest bluffs in the entertainment history. That was the year that she became the first country singer ever to appear on the cover of Playboy magazine. You should probably know that in the late 70s, Playboy wasn't just a magazine. It was one of the most famous subscription-based publications in the entire world. It was marketed as a magazine for gentlemen. Its covers were controversial, its photo spreads were provocative, and for most people, the name carried one big implication, and that was nudity. The person that appeared on the cover was featured inside the magazine in a photo spread without any clothes on. So when Dolly appeared on the cover, the world thought they knew what was coming. But Dolly had already set her own rules here. There would be no nudity, ever. And later, she explained it. Here's the quote. "I've been asked back in the day, but that was so totally not me. I would never do that. But it was a good article that they ran in there, and it was just a fun thing to do. That was just another way I was trying to market myself at that time to get into the mainstream." And it was brilliant. Dolly got the headlines, the buzz, the mainstream exposure, but she never showed the cards that people thought that she was holding. And decades later, when she was 75 years old, she found the original bunny costume, put it on, took some new photos, and gave it as a birthday surprise to her husband, Carl. Dolly is always on top of her game. Hey, if you've made it this far, thanks for sticking around. We're ready to talk about #1, the most incredible story in Dolly's career, and probably her most legendary move. This is the story about the time she was dealt the king. For this story, we're taking a step back to 1974. This is the point where Dolly had just left the Porter Wagoner show, and she was basically just beginning her solo career. Dolly is still struggling at this point to get her career launched. She has earned her seat at the table, but she's not exactly sitting behind a mountain of chips. But every choice was still a gamble, and winning was not a guarantee. Every career move was a high-stakes bet that had to be smart, calculated, and bold enough to keep her in the game. But she did have a few things going for her. She had her talent and confidence, and she had a song. "I Will Always Love You" was written for Porter Wagoner, but it was also her first real solo hit. Most people today probably know the song because of Whitney Houston. In 1992, Whitney recorded it for the Bodyguard soundtrack, and it became one of the biggest singles of all time. It topped charts worldwide, it sold more than 20 million copies, and it made Dolly Parton very, very rich. But here's the part that a lot of people don't know. Nearly 2 decades before that, before Whitney ever heard of it, back when Dolly was still trying to launch that solo career, she got an offer from the king of rock and roll. Elvis Presley wanted to record "I Will Always Love You." And for any songwriter, that was going to be the dream. But there was a catch. Elvis's manager, Colonel Tom Parker, demanded half the publishing rights to that song forever if Elvis recorded it. If Dolly agreed, she would lose control and half the profits for her most personal song, the very song that defined her independence. In 1974, she wasn't wealthy, she wasn't world famous, and again, a bad decision here could have ended her career before it ever began. Dolly has told this story in interviews several times. When she got the offer, she went home, she cried all night, and then she did the unthinkable. She said no. She walked away from the king, and then she waited 18 long years to find out if that gamble would pay off. And of course, we know now that it did. Whitney Houston's version became something of a global phenomenon in the early 90s, and that gamble paid off bigger than anyone would have imagined. Dolly's song became one of the best-selling singles in history, and every bit of it and its sales still belong to her. It may seem odd, but sometimes the strongest move isn't playing the hand you're dealt. It's folding if the stakes are too high. Dolly may have folded against the king, but by holding her ground, later she was able to crown herself the queen. All right, there you have it. 10 incredible stories. And the ultimate bluff that proved Dolly is a poker all-star at the fame game. Time and again, she's been dealt tough hands, made bold bets, and always managed to walk away a winner. She's the queen of country, she's the queen of diamonds, and clearly the one player you should never bet against. Now, if you like my tribute to Dolly and you don't want to fold on me, hit that like button. And if you're ready to stay in the game, click on subscribe. Oh, and if you've got your own favorite Dolly story that I didn't get around to talking about, lay your cards down in the comments below. Hey, if you like this video, I've got more like it. Just take a look up here and click on the next one. Thanks for playing along, and until next time, remember, when in doubt, play it like Dolly. Bet on yourself.